Hi there, I'm Jamie. I'm the education coordinator for respiratory. We're going to go over everything with how to manage the air tank, the oxygen tank, how to get it hooked up to the blender and the flow meter, how to get that hooked up to your Neopuff. We were talking about changing the tanks out. It's really important that we understand how to put this regulator on if your tank runs out, because if you don't know how to get the regulator on, you will not be able to utilize any of the rest of this stuff. So first, there are some screws back here. I don't know if you can see it, but they're like black dials. You're going to have to unscrew those to make it loose, and then your tank will slide in and out easily. Then once you replace your tank, make sure you tighten it back up. You don't want these tanks to fall out. They are under a lot of pressure, so if anything was to fall out, this will start shooting around a room like a rocket, and it could do severe harm. So just make sure whenever you're playing with tanks that they are secured appropriately. If you're in the middle of changing one to the other and your tank still has PSI, make sure you're laying it flat on the floor. Don't try to stand it up on its butt where it's kind of just sitting on the narrow end. Now, when we're talking about a regulator, your oxygen regulator and your air regulator are very different. Your oxygen, again, our green tank, that regulator is completely built in. You don't have to change anything. You do not have to add anything. It is already there. It should be brought up exactly how you see it currently. The air regulator, though, it has a lot more components to it, and you will need a tank key, which is here. I got one on my keys. I recommend you guys always have a stash just in case this one goes missing, because if this goes missing again, you won't be able to change these if everything is tightened down really tightly. Now, to change this regulator, there are little, I'm going to call them keys. They're the rectangle pieces. There's one up top. So if I'm looking at the regulator, I got my dial or my manometer on the bottom. It's the circle piece. And then on the other end, you've got a rectangle with kind of like a little T-bar. And then you also have a key on the very, very top. It's the very tip of the tank. To take your regulator on and off, you're going to take the top one where you see the bar, and you have to loosen it. Once you loosen it, your regulator will slide right off. So now let's say your tank is empty, you need to change it. You'll get a new air tank. Again, there's no regulator on it, so now it's just going to be the regular metal bar. And then if you look at the regulator itself, it's got pins on it. I don't know if you guys can see this. On here, you've got pins. So there's double pins down here and then a single pin, which is where you've got your dial. You need to line these pins up with the holes on your tank. So if you looked at your tank, you'll start noticing that there's additional 2 pins here, and it'll start making sense when you look really close to it. There is also a little washer. Where's the camera? A little washer like this. This one is old, but it's still doing its job, and that's all we care about. We don't have just because it looks ugly doesn't mean it doesn't work well. But all of your air tanks are going to have this white plastic covering on it that you have to pull off. When you pull that off, you're going to get these 2 new green washers. I recommend always having washers taped to the top, because if you lose it, it drops, it falls away, you can't find it, you will always have an extra one taped to the top. So at least have 2 or 3 taped here. You may never need them, or you might use them all in one week because you had a bad day. So to add your tank, again, we're going to take our pins, we're going to line them up. So on this tank, you can't see it from this angle, but you've got 2 pins on this, and then you've got the big pin right here. I'm going to spin it downwards so it matches up with my pins right here. And you'll notice it will all of a sudden just slide into place, and then you really can't wiggle it because it's sitting in those pins. Then when you slide this pin down, you need to make sure that it lines up with the very top indent on top of here. Now, I'm not physically strong enough to do this. That's to tighten this key down. That's where your tank key comes in. You're going to line it up at the top, and you're going to make sure it's on nice and snug. If this is not on snug, when I turn the tank itself on, you are going to hear this huge whooshing. It's going to be very loud, and you know you're leaking from somewhere. So I'm going to loosen it. We'll see if I can recreate it if we have enough tank pressure. So that's what it'll sound like if it's not on correct. You need to make this really tight. When I make it tight, hopefully this works the first time. When I go open to unlock the tank, you hear the whistle, but you don't hear that whooshing sound. The reason why we hear the whistle is because this is based off of a blender, and a blender has to have two 50 PSI sources. So you have to have 50 PSI from your air tank and 50 PSI from your oxygen tank. So now that we got that, we don't hear the whooshing, we just hear the whistle. We're going to attach it. So on here, you've got your air. Where's your camera? You got yellow and yellow. And if you look at the very bottom of this regulator, there's going to be little pins on this end with holes on this end. You're just going to line them up and make sure it snaps into place. Then you've got your oxygen tank. The oxygen tank is the easiest one. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to put a regulator on. Again, it's all built in here. Now, most of these tanks, when they come, there's going to be a little plastic cap on here. It looks like it's built in, and when you try to take it off, it's very, very difficult. It is supposed to come off. It's just to protect the threads on here. So now when we're looking at, we've got two hoses. We've got the air, which yellow to yellow. This one is not as obvious, but I know it's for my oxygen. You're going to go off of this 50 PSI piece. Here's your screw outlet here. So you're going to go here and screw it on nice and tight. So the reason why we hear that squealing again is because I didn't have this tank on. The only way to stop the squealing is for both of these tanks to be on and both of these tanks to have enough pressure in it so it regulates and registers that 50 PSI. So one of your dead giveaways that your tank is empty, or either of these tanks, is you go on, you turn this on, you don't hear the whoosh, the whooshing, the leak, but you hear a squeal. It's, even though you've got them plugged in, you're missing pressure on one end or the other. So that's your straight dead giveaway. Your first assessment is, all right, I'm probably going to have to go change that tank out for a brand new one. Any questions so far? No. Okay. So the way this is working is all we're trying to do is get air and oxygen to this blender right here. This is our FiO2. I can change it from 21 to 100%. I'm trying to get my oxygen and air to this part, so I've plugged my tanks in. They're going through the hoses into the device, into, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's two hookups right here. Those have some internal stuff, and it all gets pushed through these two tiny little yellow and green. That's how it's getting to the blender. Now, to get the oxygen from the tanks through the blender to the flow meter, now I have to turn my flow on. You want to make sure this is nice and snug. Usually 10 liters is a really good starting point for your Neopuff. So we're going to turn our flow at 10. That's just getting the actual flow. We can change the FiO2 to whatever baby needs. So we're going to set it at 10. And we're going to give whatever FiO2 the baby actually needs to maintain saturations. We're not going to be like, everybody starts at 100. They might not need 100. Now, you may put them on because you're not sure exactly where the baby needs. So start them on 100 and then just keep titrating down until you get to a good sat goal, whether it's ordered or we're just trying to get baby to NICU, whatever the situation is, just make sure they're in a safe range. Any questions so far? This is just an extra flow meter. You do not have to worry about this. If you really had to, you could put a nipple adapter here. This one actually looks like it's broken because it doesn't have the little dial on it. But you really only need one. So now that we've got our flow, we have to connect the flow to our Neopuff somehow. Do you want to? So in your needle puff bag, you should have, of course, your needle puff circuit, of course, your masks, and you'll also have some oxygen tubing. You're going to connect your oxygen tubing straight to the flow meter. And then you're going to connect the straight to the flow meter. And then you're going to go up to the Neopuff and you're going to go to the nipple adapter. Do you guys use Neopuffs frequently?
Not frequently.
No, okay. So straight to the Neopuff. When we're looking at the Neopuff, this is always going to be the inlet part. That's how the pressure is going to get put into this box. Then it goes through all of the pressure manometers, and that's how we're going to regulate the pressure. But it has to start here at this nipple adapter. Then you're going to take the Neopuff circuit. I lost my camera. The little blue guy is going to go to gas outlet. So gas inlet is how the gas is going into the box. Gas outlet is how the gas is going to your patient. Now we have to decide what kind of pressures we're going to use. A good starting point, again, I'm going to have my flow meter set at 10. I'm going to leave it at 50% so that I drain both of these. So on your on your Neopuff, you got your little T piece. If I just keep it occluded, that's how I'm giving my PEEP. So with this red cap, I don't have to occlude it. If you lose your red cap or if you've already taken it off, you're more than welcome to use a gloved hand to occlude it. Now I can see pressure registering on here. On the actual knob where the little hole is, you're going to feel flow coming out of it. You're going to see the word PEEP with a plus or a minus sign. If I need less PEEP, I'm going to the minus sign. If I need more PEEP, I'm going to go to my plus sign. And you'll notice on this dial, my dial is actually going down or up. Again, a good starting point is a PEEP of 5. So we're going to look at this, dial it in to about a PEEP of 5. Then, if we want to bag the baby, so we have everybody familiar with our little ambu bag? If we need to breathe, we're going to squeeze the bag. Well, on this, if we need to breathe, we're just going to tap the little hole on top. You'll know which hole to there's flow coming out. If you feel it, you will feel flow coming out of that. What you're trying to do is occlude that. You don't want the flow escaping. You want the flow to go into the baby's lungs. So I'm just going to tap that. That's a breath. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Okay. Now, how do we get to the 20? You've got this peak inspiratory pressure. So when I occlude this, it's going to, right now it's registering about 18, and let's say I want 20. I'm going to take my blue dial and I'm going to dial it up to about 20. Now, whenever I'm bagging the baby, I know I'm giving 20 over 5, 20 over 5. So that's how we're going to control the pressures in the lungs so we don't cause a pneumo, we don't increase the pressure, which squeezes the heart. We don't want to do any of that because that can decrease blood pressure. So that's how we're going to bag this kid. If you need to use a mask, okay, if I open this one.
Yeah.
If you need the mask, you're just going to pop it on like this. Oh, that's bent. And now, of course, if I wanted to do CPAP on the kid, I'm going to do that. I should still be registering about 5. If my baby's not breathing, I'm going to add a breath to them, and we'll see about 20 every time we push that down. Now, what is this extra dial that's hidden away? This is your safety valve right here. So if I was to accidentally, I'm giving CPAP and I'm bagging the kid, and I'm not paying attention, it's chaotic, the baby doesn't have a heartbeat, and we're all losing our mind, and I say, oh, I'm going to turn this up, and I meant FiO2, but in my head, I just went to the big blue dial in front of me, and I cranked this up, I could accidentally be giving my kid 50 centimeters of water pressure in the lung. That is not good. That's going to cause a lot of trauma to the lungs. So what this is doing is, this is our max pressure relief valve. It is actually limiting my peak inspiratory pressure. So let's say in my world, I do not want my baby getting more than 35 centimeters of water pressure. I'm gonna go to my max relief and I'm gonna dial this down to 35. I'm gonna cover it back up so nobody accidentally touches it. So now when I max out this, the most I will ever give to the lung is 35 centimeters of water pressure. Now again, I still wanted to start at 20. I'm gonna dial my peak inspiratory pressure down to 20. So I'm still giving my 20/5, but everybody's losing their mind. I say, turn up the FiO2 and you go, oh gosh, okay. You turn this all the way up. I'm still only gonna give 35 because that's what I decided my max pressure is gonna be. Most of the time, this is gonna stay covered. You probably won't ever have to touch it. You'll just start noticing if you ever dial it in, and let's say we're not getting chest rise and fall, and we need to go up on the pressure, and you cannot go anymore on that dial. You're gonna have to undo your max pressure relief and slowly increase it this way to get more pressure into the baby's lungs. Any questions? Any questions from you guys on the WebEx?
No, we're okay, thank you.
Do you want me to cover anything else?
The buttons.
Buttons, okay, buttons. So honestly, I don't deal with the buttons very frequently. As an RT, we handle the gas and the neopuff and all that. But you do have, this should be automatically set, I believe at 37, so just like regular body temperature. If you need to go up, you'll hit your buttons. If you need to go down, anytime you open this up, your Isolette is going to drop its temperature. So if you're cleaning this and everything, that's fine. It's going to alarm. It's going to be very upset with you because you're letting out all the heat. Just know that you're going to end up closing this back up. Always make sure all of your Isolette doors are closed up because, again, we just dropped from 37 to 36.1 in that 15 seconds I had it open. It's going to drop really quickly. Here is your battery. If we've plugged it in, you'll see, I believe it's this green one. But this is telling you different information. I'll get more information on all the batteries and I will send it to Amanda so that she can send it out to you guys. When it is alarming, you're just going to hit your silence button. This is allowing you to keep cleaning your Isolette, or it will tell you, hey, something's wrong. Now I can silence it in a clear, thoughtful mind. I can go ahead and troubleshoot what's going on. Any other questions?
Hi, it's not a question. I just wanted to, if you can show us again how to check if the tanks still is not empty.
You know what? Thank you. I did not know that.
Thank you.
So, to check if your tank is empty, anything under 500 pressure PSI is considered empty. I'm just loosening this so I can pull this out. So on your oxygen, so your green tank, you've got a pressure manometer here. Make sure you're looking at it spot on. Don't look at it at an angle because it'll look like there's more or less pressure in the tank. But you're going to look at this. The most you can ever see is going to be 2,000. Sometimes you might see like a 2,100 if they max filled the tank. But 2,000 PSI all the way down to 500, you're more than welcome to use it. If you know that your kid is on 100% oxygen, this means that even though I've got 2 tanks, I'm using my entire oxygen tanks. I'm giving 100% oxygen. So if I know that, and let's say you have to transport down to NICU, it's not too far of a drive, but it is still a drive. I would probably change this tank out to make it have closer to that 2,000 since I know I'm going to go through all. I wouldn't try this 100% if 100% transport if I knew this was setting at like 700. I know my tank's going to run out before that because I'm giving so much oxygen. Now, if my baby is on 21% and you're just giving pressure or CPAP, then we know all the flow and pressure is coming from my air tank because there's only one way to give 21%, and that's to remove all the extra oxygen. So then I know this tank is going to be running dry. Same thing. Granted, we had to put that regulator on. That's what we talked about in the very beginning. But once that regulator is on and I have my tank on, so remember this very tip right here is what physically turns the tank on so it starts reading with this regulator. Once I've turned this on, you will see the needle on here immediately pop from 0 up to whatever the pressure is. So right now it shows 1,400. This is more than enough to do a transport if you needed to get from here to NICU or wherever, maybe here to mom, whatever you're transporting. Again, same rule of thumb, anything under 500 must be changed. It's considered empty. If you're going to NICU and your kid is on low FiO2, so like 21 to 30%, I would probably not go anything lower than 700. My tank will probably run out by then. But you're gonna have your dials and your pressure manometers, and that's showing you how much. This one will always be on. Your oxygen tank, you can see at any given time how much pressure is still left in it. You don't have to plug anything in. You do not have to turn anything on. It's just always registering because it's got a built-in. This one, I'm going to turn this off really quick so we don't have to listen to our squeal.
But we need to make sure we're checking it at the end of every step.
I recommend it, yeah. You hear how this is slowly fading into a quiet. It's not going to immediately turn off. What's happening is because I still have pressure built up in this regulator, it has to drain or bleed out that extra pressure. So even though I've turned it off, I've unplugged it, what you're hearing is the draining of the pressures through this blender. So don't immediately, oh my gosh, something is broken. As long as you hear that squeal slowly getting quieter, you are good to go. You know you've turned your tank off. So let's say you walk in and your tank pressure there's nothing on it. All I did right now was turn the tank off with this extra, or with the very end cap. But let's say you just put this regulator on. You can do what's called bleeding the tank. If I open this top piece, so where this T-bar is, you're going to hear a big whoosh. And what we're doing is we're letting go the pressure that built up in this regulator. So when I open it up, that was a quiet whoosh. Some of them are very loud. I'm draining the pressure out of the regulator. So now when I look at this, it's going to have the needle pointing at 0. The moment I plug it in, even though I've made this really tight, I have to go back here. I have to turn this on because by turning this end piece on, I'm allowing the tank to talk to the regulator. So I turn it on, and now down here, this pressure regulator went from 0 to, I think I said 1400. And that's the only way you're going to be able to see if this tank has pressure in it. Now, I recommend always cracking this tank. Always cracking it and leaving your needle at 0 until you have to use it. By allowing this to continue to communicate with the regulator, if you have the tiniest micro leak, you won't be able to hear it. You won't see this dropping. You will bleed a tank out throughout the entire day. And let's say you come in, you change your tank, and night shift comes in and says, she never changes her tank. And you're like, I really did. It's bled out. It's because there's a micro leak somewhere that we just can't hear. So I always recommend having this loose. And when you're ready to use it, go ahead and tighten this up nice and tight. And then turn your tank on over here. Again, oxygen, easiest one. All I have to do is walk up to it. Either has pressure or it doesn't have pressure. Now, when we went and plugged this in though, I do not recommend ever leaving this screwed on because again, there could be a micro leak that throughout the entire day, it's just slowly been leaking oxygen out. You won't hear it. You won't notice how slow the needle is dropping. All you're going to see is that all of a sudden you come in and your tank is completely empty. So if you're not using it, keep everything completely disconnected. Take your oxygen off. Take your air off. This is just a spin and it'll pop out. So if it's on here, you just spin this and it pops right off. And then make sure this top piece with the bar is loose with your tank cube so that you never accidentally bleed anything. Any questions? If anybody wants to play with this, you're more than welcome to. Is there anything else you want to go over?
Maybe like you could do a quick run through of like what it would look like if we're getting ready to transport a baby, like what it's gonna look like if we needed to use CPAP and you're getting ready to transport.
What it will look like is, we'll start fresh. So we get a call and we've got a 37-weeker that's got central cyanosis and you've been tested, you've done all the things, and they've decided we're going to admit to NICU for observation or whatever it is. You've got to get the oxygen into this Isolette. So we're going to go take our air tank, make sure my regulator is nice and snug. So I'm going to take my tank key, tighten it. I'm going to take my air, plug it in. Remember, when I plug one of these in, it's going to squeal until I turn the other one on. So all I did was screw this in and open this up at the same time. You got to be mindful, mom and dad, if they're with you while you're doing this, they're already a little panicked. Warn them, this is going to squeal. If you all of a sudden look panicked, parent is already, my baby's going to NICU, they're freaking out, this is making a big loud noise, it does not help any situation. So let them know, I'm going to plug this in, it's going to start squealing, it's supposed to do that.
Can we turn the yellow knob on before we put the oxygen connected so it won't squeal?
No matter what, it's going to squeal. So if you can do it at the same time, you may limit your squeal like what we just did. But just let them know it's going to squeal, and it all because of that blender. So now that my tanks are on, I'm going to grab my Neopuff bag. Remember that Neopuff is going to have your oxygen tubing. We're going to hook one set up to this flow meter on the bottom. Turn your flow to 10 liters. Put the other oxygen tubing straight to your Neopuff to gas inlet. Take your Neopuff circuit. Hook the blue end of your Neopuff circuit, or depending if we ever have a different brand, it'll just be the hard plastic cylinder piece to your gas outlet. If your kid is getting CPAP at this point, you're going to find the appropriate mask. Your Neopuff comes with this size and a smaller size, but after that 37 weeks, we're probably going to use the bigger one. Then we're going to set up our pressure. So I can either keep my red cap that I just dropped on the floor, ma'am, or I can use my hand. Either one is fine. This is the easiest version. I got to dial in my PEEP. Right now it's registering at about 25. That's way too much. Remember, our goal is 5. I'm going to take my PEEP valve and I'm going to turn it down to the negatives or the minus sign. And I'm going to watch my manometer until it lines up with about 5. Make sure you're looking at it head on, because anytime you see dials like this, it will look more or less than the actual number, and you want to make sure you're actually giving the 5. Then we need to make sure our pressure is okay. When we bag the kid, we don't want to have too much pressure. So I'm going to occlude the top. Now my pressure manometer is going to jump up. Again, our good goal is about 20. If it's too much or too little, I'm going to go to this peak inspiratory pressure, or the big blue dial. And I'm going to turn this down until my dial registers about 20. And now you're good to go. Now you can put the mask on. If my hand is the baby, I'm going to do my CPAP. If I just need CPAP, I'm going to hold my mask there. I'm not going to do anything. If I need a bag for the baby, if my baby is not breathing at all or effectively or not enough, we're going to bag like this. It's going to be a lot. You're going to have a lot of people talking. If you're standing there, sway with the kid. This is how you can have a full-blown conversation while you're trying to bag 30 times a minute, is by swaying. Because when I'm talking to you and you're sitting there and you're trying to keep up, you're going to get all of a sudden you're going to be double tapping or doing too long. But it's somehow usually physical swaying, tapping your foot just helps you stay on track into a nice rhythmic breathing. If your baby does not need CPAP, they're not grunting, they honestly look okay. They are obviously breathing, but we've got a little bit of discoloration. We have a pulse ox of 82. Now you can just give blow by. So I can keep my mask on here. I can take my mask off and give blow by here. All we're doing is giving flow from here. The biggest thing, and we have all been guilty of it, myself included. Your kid's doing okay, you get everything set up and you give blow by and you're like, this isn't making the baby's not getting any better. It's because we all forgot to go down to this little dial and actually dial in an FiO2. If it sits at 21%, that's what everybody in this room is breathing right now. So we're not giving them any extra oxygen. We're just giving them flow. So make sure that you go down to your blender and actually look at an FiO2 before you judge the baby off of blow by. And if you need to go up, you can go up. If it's too much, you can always titrate down. And then of course, keep monitoring your tanks. You do not want to get low and you're on the floor flow. You won't worry about an elevator. But do you guys ever transport up from the ED or do they always go to the NICU?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Do you guys ever transport kids from the ED to here? They always go to NICU?
They always go to
Okay, well then not worry about it. Any questions? Comments, concerns? On your ambu bag, you're going to plug your end into a flow meter. You could use this one, again, 10 liters. This is only going to be used when your tanks accidentally run out in transport and you need to bag the baby. The problem with this is I cannot give CPAP, so I cannot utilize a mask and just hold it on the baby and do anything. I'll give oxygen, but I'm not actually giving CPAP because it's not a pressurized system. I can bag the baby and we'll see how much pressure we're giving right on our pressure manometer, and you're going to aim for about 20/5. I cannot CPAP the kid, and the only way I can get blow by is if I was to put this piece at the mouth, and now I'm going to be giving the blow by from the flow. And I'm still going to dial in the FiO2 on the blender if I'm using this setup to control how much oxygen. So this is used for bagging the baby if they're not breathing breathing effectively or not enough, or blow by. You cannot give CPAP on here. This is a PEEP valve, so if I needed pressure while I'm bagging, again, I want to aim for 20, which is coming from me squeezing the bag, but on exhalation, I want them to breathe against the let's say 5 of PEEP. You're going to take your PEEP valve and you're going to dial it down. If I needed more than 5, I'm going to dial it up, and you're just going to line up this red part with the numbers that you can see here.